Not much to look at, is it? This is the Speer 168 grain Gold Dot. It's a very short little bullet, 1.15 inches overall, with a very high ballistic coefficient of 0.572. That's a G1 ballistic coefficient. Now, the reason why I'm interested in this particular bullet all stems from a previous video called 5 Bullets. And when I analyzed 5 very different 168 grain bullets for the .30 caliber, .308 Winchester, some trends started to show up, and those trends were all related to the precision of those different rounds and driven really by the bullet itself. What I learned from that is that my particular Ruger precision rifle shoots shorter bullets better than longer bullets, and it also shot bullets with a very short boat tail better than bullets that had a long boat tail. And the last and maybe the most important part was that the ratio of the overall length of the bullet to its length of the MEP-plat to ogive had to be fairly high. In other words, the ideal bullet for this Ruger precision rifle had obviously a short boat tail. It was short in overall length, but it had a long bearing surface length, and a rather forward ogive placement. So I didn't know if such a bullet even existed, and shortly after that, doing that analysis on those different groups, I started looking around for a bullet that might suit those criteria. And the one that I found that is closest to those overall criteria is this one right here, Speer Gold Dot. Now, the Speer Gold Dot is considered a defensive round. Probably could be used for hunting. I haven't tested it terminally yet, but it's an interesting bullet, that's for sure. And as I said earlier, it's not much to look at. Certainly doesn't really compare with kind of those really sleek and actually kind of beautiful bullets that we've looked at from Nosler and even other bullets from Speer. But I'm very interested in giving this one a try. So what I'm doing is I'm working up a brand new load for this bullet. I'll be using, once again, RL-15, starting at a powder charge of 42.0 grains and ultimately ending up with 7 different powder charges. Now, when I went out to the range to test fire these, the first thing that I did, of course, is I'm watching for safety, watching for any signs of pressure. Yes, I've shot a lot of different 168 grain bullets with RL-15, but then again, this is a very different, very short bullet, and so I'm going to work this thing up and watch for those pressure signs. Not really expecting any problems, but I'm still always going to be on the lookout for those sort of problems. And I'm running this over the chronograph using my lab radar chronograph, and so I'm watching for what's called the velocity node, or the optimal charge weight. And I'm also watching, I have a camera downrange, and I'm watching shot placement 1, 2, 3, etc., watching for that harmonic node that might appear, and I hope it does appear. Now, what I found is that shot 1 and 2 gave me a very, very impressive harmonic node. Those 2 rounds impacted in almost the exact same place. Remember, I'm at 100 yards. I'm shooting this off the bench. And the second thing that I found was that I have a pretty nice optimal charge weight or velocity node. Oftentimes I call that the sill on my graph. And what's very interesting about this optimal charge weight, or this sill of 42.8 grains, is that it's effectively the same as what I found shooting my Sierra tipped Match King, which gave me a very strong sill or velocity node at 42.9 grains. Well, since I shot all of my different rounds and shot them very safely, successfully, I had suspected it would be no problem, so I brought out 5 more rounds loaded at that optimal charge weight of 42.9 grains, the optimal charge weight that had been shown up with the other bullet, the Sierra tipped Match King. And I shot a 5-round group with it, also at 100 yards. And, you know, it did not do badly at all, just over 1 MOA. And I had some Fowlers that I fired before with the Sierra tipped Match Kings. And so this bullet actually shows some very nice promise. Right out of the box, I'm at 1 MOA. By the way, I had to try those Berger 168 grain bullets one more time, and that's the group here. And it just, again, just does not perform well in my Ruger precision rifle. And I'm sure it's because it's just too long of a bullet, very similar to those Nosslers that I was shooting. And so I'm going to kind of give up on that Berger 168 grain hybrid target bullet and just move on to other things. It doesn't work well in my Ruger, but it might certainly work well in other rifles. And now I'm getting ready to go back out to the range, and I'm going to be shooting 2 different groups. I've got one group at 42.2 grains of RL15. That's the harmonic node. And I've got another 5-shot group at 42.8 grains. I really don't expect much difference to occur compared to that 42.9, but it would be also very, very nice to confirm that this is a good load for this individual bullet, the Speer Gold Dot. So I'm ready to head out to the range and see how this does. 5 rounds. Target in the upper right. .23-28. Whoa, 23-88. Now I've already fired 4 rounds of Fowler, started off with a dry bore. So I'm hoping not to see any sort of cold bore effects. .23-92. That's interesting. Center bullseye. .400. This one has a heavier powder charge. You're probably thinking, what is he doing? Well, I'll tell you what he's doing. I'm psyching myself out. You see, I just saw the last 3 rounds that were fired effectively open up one ragged hole. So I'm a little bit concerned that I'm going to muff this last shot. Typically, shooting a group goes like this. I get on target, and I'm pretty close at this point immediately, and I'll take a few breaths. Now, I don't take really super deep breaths, but some reasonably deep breaths cycling through 2 or 3, and what I'm doing is I'm watching the rise and fall of that reticle across the bullseye. And I'll make whatever adjustments necessary, but normally I get what I called locked in, and I'm just watching the rise and fall of that reticle across the bullseye. And then at some point I can determine that maybe it's when my breath is completely exhaled or completely inhaled that that reticle is actually resting on the bullseye, exactly where I want the bullet to hit or where I want those reticles to be placed. And then what I will do is I will use that breath point and I'll stop my breathing for a short period of time, ideally as short as possible, and I kind of go into this, the get into the bubble type of mentality. Focus on the front sight, steady pressure on the trigger. 1 pound, 2 pounds, 3 pounds, it's gone. Now, if I get out of that routine, I lose my consistency, and that's exactly what happened on round number 5. What I started to do is I started to focus on, I gotta put this shot exactly where I want to put it, where I need to put it, and I didn't do my very consistent shooting routine. And I tried to very delicately squeeze that trigger, and it took me far too long, holding my breath and exhaling, trying to start it all over again, almost getting tunnel vision as I'm trying to watch that target, and I muffed that last shot. It really isn't a terrible group, but I know that that round shouldn't have been placed there and probably should have went through maybe some of those same holes as previously, or at least closer to it. But when we're looking at the end result, a couple of very good and important things already happened that we can make use of from this session at the range. And the first one is that there is a difference between the two powder charges. This powder charge was determined using harmonic mean, or harmonic node, and it gave me a 1.6 extreme spread, 1.56 MOA. Not bad for some rifles, but not really adequate for this Ruger precision rifle. The Speer Gold Dot, again, same exact bullet, loaded identically, save for the difference in the powder charge. This powder charge was determined using optimal charge weight. Essentially, it was a velocity node, and it shot a 1.05 MOA group. We can call it, I guess, a 1 MOA group. Now, what's interesting is these Fowlers. Now, there's 4 rounds fired right here. This is 167 grain Lapua Scanners, Creedmoor factory ammo, and boy, they sure did group really, really well. One of the few instances that the factory load did so well. In fact, I would say flat out beat my reloads or hand loads today. And the reason why I want to talk about this just a little bit is simply because of what Jim Owens calls the shooting in your mind. When I shoot Fowlers, I'm not so terribly concerned about precision and getting a tiny, tiny group. So I tend to shoot faster. I don't dawdle on that one round. I don't squeeze that trigger probably as delicately as I do otherwise. And I'm starting to wonder if some of that is actually reflecting in the groups. They're opening up because I'm spending too much time probably between rounds. So time to get back to the foundational concepts of precision rifle shooting. But overall, that is a nice group. And now what I want to do is I want to work on the bullet seating depth. And I have a little bit of play with this bullet. It right now is not seated to the maximum combined overall length to fit into that magazine. So I have a little bit of room to play with it. And I did that purposely because I can pull that bullet out, make a longer combined overall length, and not worry about increasing pressures. So that'll be my next step on the next edition of Extreme Reloading. Thanks for watching.